Good evening. It's fairly late, so my apologies right away for any flaws, errors, or general lack of professionalism. This video is about Renaissance ideals of manhood and womanhood. It's supposed to be part of a series of videos on understanding Shakespeare and his world. It's directed at my students, so forgive me if I simplify things. Yeah, first of all, what's the content of this presentation? Yeah, first of all, I will outline the concept of courtly love, the changing ideals of manhood in Shakespeare's time, the courtly ideal of womanhood, and the concepts of obedience and degree. Now we'll focus really on the world of the courts, yeah, so noblemen, noblewomen, not the world of peasants, craftsmen, city life, not that kind of thing, yeah. These worlds are different worlds, and much of what I'm going to tell you won't apply to men and women in peasant households, for instance. Yes, let's begin with the concept of courtly love. This is a famous picture from the Codex Manesse, 14th century, which shows us right away that courtly love was a medieval tradition dating back to the Middle Ages. It's knights hopelessly showing their love for a woman who's married to another man. You know, that kind of thing. From films, television, whatever. This form of love was considered chaste and honorable. Chaste, so no sex. Yeah. And honorable, especially because it was thought that men could develop a closer connection to God as they were celebrating female beauty and virtues and self-discipline through courtly love. The knight was expected to show obedience towards this married woman, this unattainable woman that he would never have. A key symbol, and that's important for Shakespeare, of this kind of relationship was the tamed falcon. Yeah, because the tamed falcon, falconry was, taming falcons was a sport among the nobility, and the tamed falcon was thought of as an animal that was able to control his own appetite. The falcon hunts and catches its prey, but it doesn't eat it. It controls its appetite, yeah, its desire to eat the meat. Yeah. So the falcon became the symbol of self-discipline, of tamed desire, and as such a symbol of courtly love. And I suppose people just loved these birds. Yeah. The falcon was also considered a very noble and passionate creature. Yeah. A good example is can be found in Romeo and Juliet. Yeah, there's this wonderful scene where Romeo visits Juliet secretly, of course. Yeah, and he's about to leave, but then she calls him back and she says, "Hist, Romeo, hist! Oh, for a falconer's voice to lure this tassel gentle back again." She wants to have this falconer's voice to be able to tame the falcon, Romeo in this case. He's the tassel, the young falcon. She wants to lure him back, yeah, to tame him. So yeah, the falcon is a symbol of courtly love and courtship. The knight was also expected to perform honorable deeds on the battlefield, or more often rather the tournament, yeah, where the lady could be present. This was called chivalry, and what's important for us and for Shakespeare's time is that this form of practice was still very much present in Shakespeare's time, at the court of Elizabeth I. So you can imagine knights fighting each other in tournaments and in honor of their unattainable queen. This was quite elaborate, so they had massive scenery, beautiful stages, extremely expensive in order to create the right atmosphere that they thought was needed, yeah, for these shows. A famous tournament is the one from 1581, and in this tournament there were four knights, the four foster children of desire, and they tried to fight their way into the Fortress of Beauty, where the queen was sitting and waiting. But she was defended by 16 defenders, 16 defending knights. So these four attackers eventually had to concede and admit defeat honorably. It must have been a great show, yeah. What this shows, and this can be found again and again in Shakespeare and elsewhere too, of course, is that love was symbolically expressed in images of warfare. Now this may sound strange, but it's actually familiar to us, yeah. Maybe you've heard people talk of male conquests, so conquests of women, yeah, women that are conquered, yeah, by men. So we still use that language in certain contexts. Yeah. So but these ideals were also changing in Shakespeare's time. Especially Italian authors had a huge impact on many of these ideas and concepts and gender roles. They were in the process of developing new concepts of courtly love and chivalry in the Renaissance. One of the probably most important authors was Castiglione. Forgive me if my Italian is horrible. And his book Il Cortegiano from 1528 became an extremely popular guide for everyone who wanted to be a gentleman at court. And this gentleman had to be able to do much more than the medieval knight. Castiglione was thinking of a courtier who was now supposed to be skilled in the courtly arts, so dancing and music. This knight would have to be educated in languages, literature, religion, of course. This knight would have to master courtly love, but still, and this is a similarity to the medieval ideal, he'd still have to be able to perform in war and to be a swordsman. Yeah, and of course obedience was very important. Yeah? Obedience to their lords. Now let's move on to the women. Yeah, the courtly ideal of womanhood. Again, this is a courtly ideal. It does not necessarily apply to other people, yeah, in the Renaissance in the same way. Now, again, the Italians had a lot of influence. Yeah, most famously the Italian poet Petrarch. He wrote a lot of sonnets. So that's the form of poetry with a very strict formal structure, short poems. And his poems were extremely popular, and he exerted a lot of influence over Renaissance Europe. His poetry was inspired by the ideal of courtly love, And English poets took this up and began celebrating Elizabeth I as an exemplary woman. Now I know, this sounds great, but of course there were also many people who didn't think much of a female queen. John Knox most famously, who railed against the monstrous regiment of women, yeah, because women shouldn't be in charge, in his opinion. Yeah, but of course there were poets who celebrated the Virgin Queen, the Elizabeth I, as the ideal woman. Part of this was the Petrarchan ideal of beauty, as celebrated in his sonnets. Yeah, so golden hair, pale, beautiful white skin. You might call it a fair complexion. Yeah, I think you hear that expression in Shakespeare from time to time. Red cheeks, surrounded by white skin, often compared to roses. Yeah, poets from that time, also dramatists, they often use these catalogs of beauty, yeah, catalogs that contained lists, yeah, of attributes, female attributes, like golden hair, the cheeks, the skin, whatever, yeah. A famous example that illustrates this very well is the idealized portrait of a lady, the portrait of Simonetta Vespucci as a nymph by Sandro Botticelli from 1475. And as you can see, you have the golden hair, the red lips, the pale skin, yeah, this ideal of beauty. More importantly, the Petrarchan ideal, or the Renaissance ideal in general, did not just include ideals of beauty, but also certain norms of behavior. So modesty was considered a female virtue. Courtesy, silence, yeah. Noble women were not necessarily expected to speak up, yeah, and of course obedience, yeah, to their fathers and later to their husbands. Extremely important, and this is something that you have to remember when you read Shakespeare. This is a time when these women in Shakespeare, there's a lot of social pressure, yeah, to be obedient, yeah. Now, all of these virtues were suitable for a noblewoman's life in private and not in public. This does not mean that there were not noble women with power. Elizabeth I is the most famous example, but there are more exceptions to the rule. Obedience and degree. Now, Renaissance media constantly reminded people in Europe of the importance of obedience and social hierarchies. Noblemen were supposed to be obedient to their lords, their families, the kings or emperors. Women, I've said this earlier, were supposed to be obedient to their fathers, and once they were married, to their husbands. Now, if their husbands died, they could actually inherit power in many cases. And children, of course, yeah, that's in the Bible. Yeah, children were expected to be obedient to their parents, especially the fathers as the heads, so to speak, of the households. Now, social order and social hierarchies were part of a whole, of an entire divine order. Now, divine meaning a God-given order, an order that God had purposefully created. So disruptions, yeah, were heavily criticized, because they were considered disruptions of an order that had been ordained by God. So disobedience itself was often portrayed as a threat to this divine and social order. If God has decided to make you a noble woman, you're supposed to be obedient. That's part of this God-given order. And this partly explains why some of these characters in Shakespeare defend obedience and fight disobedience so fiercely. But then, and that's wonderful about Shakespeare, you have all these characters who don't play by the rules. All of these women trying to break out of these, out of these social norms and pressures. And that's great. And has a lot of this offers a lot of potential for especially for female actors in Shakespeare nowadays. A great chain of being was that's the famous ideological symbol behind this. The great chain of being that began with God at the top and stretched downwards in a long hierarchy to the lowest animals. So each creature, each person, so to speak, had their own place in this hierarchy. There was some movement was possible up and down. Especially men were considered to be human society was considered to be in between the divine and the animal kingdom. So human beings could aspire to be more than animals, or they could, so to speak, fall and become more animal-like, or more base, I suppose. So each person had been assigned a particular position in the hierarchy. You were either born noble or you weren't. This position in the great chain of being was called degree. And this term comes up in Shakespeare fairly often, and it's very important. It also has an impact on the way people speak. So often you have lords addressing other people, without noble blood, with thou, whereas peasants or simple citizens from the cities would address lords with ye, and this reflects the difference in degree. Apart from disobedience, social and political divisions were also considered threats to this divine order. Of course, all of this, division, disobedience, struggles, all of this was part of daily life in the Elizabethan era. War, corruption, feuds among noble families, rebellious children. Think of Juliet, rebelling against her father and her family. Men and women, are being disobedient. That was normal. That was normal. All I'm saying is that society demanded unity, order, and obedience through all of these images: great chain of being, courtly love, ideals of manhood and womanhood. All of this was in a way of a means to discipline people who did not follow these norms. It also allowed society to have a certain coherence. So we can finish with saying that reality was far from the ideal of society. If there are any questions, feel free to contact me in the comment section. I'd also appreciate any corrections that you may have, or constructive feedback, any serious comment. These are my works cited. I won't explain them to you. You can look at them if you like. It's late enough. I'll stop at this point. I hope that you find this video instructive and that it helps you understand men and women in Shakespeare and some of the images in Shakespeare, falconry for instance. Thank you for your attention and see you one day or another. Bye bye.